You're watching the GameSpot co-op stage, sponsored by LEGO Star Wars: The Force Awakens.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to E3 2016 on the GameSpot co-op stage, brought to you by LEGO Star Wars: The Force Awakens. I'm one of your hosts from Kinda Funny, Greg Miller, alongside Kinda Funny's own Colin Moriarty.
Hello, Greg.
Kinda Funny's own Tim Geddes.
Let him host.
GameSpot.com's Chris Waters.
Yay.
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm delighted.
Now, I've assembled this panel of experts to decide once and for all the best conference of E3. Now, don't just shout it out and end the segment early. We'll go through
Nintendo Treehouse. Pokemon.
I assume we're all on the page. PlayStation?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's pretty obvious.
Undeniably.
Yeah.
That said, this is what I said yesterday.
Yeah.
Microsoft can't catch a break.
Yeah.
Right? The example I use, Xbox One selling very well. PS4 is selling meteorically, so no one cares that Xbox One is selling very well. Xbox One has a great conference. That Sony goes last has a better conference. Now no one talks about how Xbox had a great conference.
Right.
So I want to be very clear, both first parties very strong. But Sony clearly the winner. 5 exclusives. Boom, 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 right in the beginning. Very little talking, very little fanfare, just showing the games.
When we're talking about why PlayStation stands out, clearly it's the library, it's all these different things. But for part of it, Chris, is the fact that it was the exact opposite of all the conferences we hated.
It was direct. They hit you with the trailers. Boom, 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 like you're saying. And then, I mean, let's not discount the orchestra playing.
The presentation of the whole thing, from the set to the orchestra, all of that stuff, it was about focusing it on the giant screen. Here's a game. Here's something that's going to happen, and they're going to, everything there accompanied what they were showing us,
right.
Not what they were telling us. I think that's really important.
And I think you were the one who pointed it out today while we were talking, or maybe it was Danny, but I'll give you credit because you're American, is the fact that the curtains only opened for Hideo Kojima.
Oh my goodness.
Like, the curtains were closed,
Yeah.
People walked out in front of him a lot, but they only opened to reveal the Hideo Kojima.
And and everything drew your attention up. I mean, that was a regal entrance.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
if this isn't minting this guy as game royalty, I don't know what is. Like,
Yeah.
he's already there, and to see them continue to treat him that way, I'm for it. I mean, the dude is far from flawless, but like to have that kind of focus on a creator like that, like a rock star,
Yeah.
it's awesome.
No, I think it's cool. I think it's cool that it gives people, for him to be in that position, it allows other people to one day be in that position. You know, you got to create it, and you got to like be hyped about stuff and be excited about stuff, or else no one else will be.
And putting the spotlight on the game creator as well. Like,
Yeah.
you know, I think Sean did a great job of emceeing the event.
Yeah.
But having creators out there and spotlighting them and thriving, I think that's great.
Yeah, it flies in the face of what you were saying on some of our shows about how you don't want games getting announced if they're not within an 18-month window, and even that's stretching it.
Yeah.
But I think we might lose sight of the fact that, you know, Kojima came out and said, "I'm back." And it really was his first real public appearance since then, right? The Game Awards didn't happen for him, and based on that, you can imagine that PSX didn't happen for him. Because then a week, you know, at the end of the PSX week, they have the video that's kind of awkward of Andy House again.
And they also ended with Paragon and stuff at PSX,
Exactly.
which is bizarre as hell. I mean, I have 2 things to say. I think to Chris's point, I think it's right. Like, I like to showcase the people that create games. We just had David Cage on before, another game creator that's well known. That's the head of his studio. And this goes way back to the heritage of why people left Atari to found Activision.
Yeah.
The entire idea of like founding a company to showcase games. This was also EA's charge in the 80s. To put people, David Crane, his face on a box. David Crane's a boy in his blob. You know what I mean? So this goes way back to the heritage of that, and I think it's important that we do that because these people are artists and they are creators. But I don't think they would have materially benefited or lost anything by not having Kojima at that conference. They didn't need him there.
Sure.
And they still would have won without him there. They didn't win because he was there. And that game, I mean, anyone who thinks that game's coming before 2019 at the earliest is fooling themselves. And there's a lot of delusion around that, I think, on the internet right now. But give him the time he needs.
Yeah.
But you didn't, you know, I do believe, like we said before, Bethesda really did it last year, the 6th, 12th, and 18th month salvo. Anything after 18 months, I don't want to see it. I don't care if it exists. I don't want to know about it. And so it's cool to see Kojima's, you know, game and the name, and you got Norman Reedus back and all this kind of stuff. It's awesome. Kojima's a hero, but we don't need it. You know, you let off with these 5 great exclusives, and let's focus on those things.
But it was still riding that excitement train of him. He's out now and he's free, and here he is.
I like it. I think that I agree with what you're saying generally, but I do think that 1 or 2 announcements that are, this is a far-flung thing. This is why you need to be excited for the future. I think that's a great thing. And yeah, people are going to be asking, where is it every single time? But that's fun. It's fun to speculate and be like, where is it? Is it going to be a PSX? Is it going to be an FC3? Is it going to be at TGS? Like, I like those questions, because without that, we always know what's going to be there unless it's a total surprise. Yeah, there's no fun in that.
I mean, I like the surprise angle. I mean, because a lot of people are being like, well, you know, Colin, you're being hypocritical because you're praising Sony for announcing all these games and showing these games, and we don't know the release dates. I'm like, dollars to donuts, I bet you those are all 2017 games that they showed. You know, God of War, Detroit Become Human, probably both 2017 games.
I still think Detroit could slip. And I know that's funny because I predicted it might be out this fall.
Yeah,
but that's the thing with David Cage.
One of them could slip, but I think in terms of managing the portfolio, my instinct tells me that they don't want to put dates on anything because of what happens when you do that. And it happened with Uncharted, and it happened with
Horizon.
Horizon. It happens with almost everything they announced. The Last Guardian. Yeah. Seeing a date on that was a really huge deal. But I think the intent behind what they're doing is that in their internal portfolio, they'll see how everything shakes out, but they're probably aiming for 2017 for those 3 games. And if 2 of them hit, which I think they will, I think you're going to see Days Gone first half, God of War second half, you know, or you're going to see Horizon in February. So I think they manage things really well. I will say, though, that now I've been talking to people about this, and the more I think about the Sony conference, the more I think it's true, that Neo's slot was probably at the end.
Yeah.
And showing Days Gone there was just weird. When you
it was kind of fillery and weird as an end cap to the entire conference.
Interesting, yeah.
Because they could have shown a trailer and then gameplay back-to-back, which they've done before.
Yeah.
They did for the rest of the show.
And so they put that at the end, which I think was interesting. And Andrew House giving an interview to Financial Times 2 days before E3 is just a random interview saying like Neo's real or our new console's real, it will not be at E3 is super weird. And I still think that the intent was to have it there, and I think that now that they know that the console is so underpowered, you have to assume that they're kind of scared now. Whether or not they've already whether they're through the looking glass and it's over and they have to release it or not, I still say they take that thing back inside and figure out what they're going to do with it, because the Scorpio rumored specs are way more powerful than the PS4 4K's rumored specs.
And it's interesting to look at the Sony press conference and what we liked about it, you know, that it was game relentlessly, and compared to Microsoft, which, I mean, that had a lot more of the sort of dynamism that past conferences have had. You know, they had platform talk. They talked about Xbox Live. They talked about their ID at Xbox. They had indie games had a significant showing. I think the conspicuous lack of many indie games on the PlayStation stage was a big change this year for them. So Microsoft's press conference, I think, still really strong.
Yeah, I think amazing. I think Microsoft's press conference was one of the best ones they've ever done, and I think that I am shocked that Sony beat them. Like, I really am.
It did seem like when we finished the Microsoft one, it was like,
wow.
Well, now the bar's really
because
high.
they did nail it, and that's what Colin's saying is like, this year's just been great. The conferences were great. EA was the only bad one. Ubisoft had issues, but like the thing is, Ubisoft had games. Like Ubisoft, when you look at it for what they announced, if you're someone that's looking at GameSpot later on in the day and just reading the announcements, they had a great conference. If you watched it, it wasn't that good.
Too long.
You know?
Shave an hour off it.
A whole hour off. It would have been great. But overall, when you look at the conferences from a pure announcement standpoint, everything, they were all great except for EA. So, but Microsoft and Sony, I think, were really, they nailed the presentation and the announcements, and I think that's the most important thing. I didn't think you can get better than Microsoft in terms of pacing, and then Sony did.
And you're making a strong case here, Tim, for Microsoft's strength, and I think one of the reasons is I think there's more to chew on in the coming weeks from Microsoft. You have more about their plan as a company in a variety of ways in terms of their internal development, their consoles, their games. Sony, with their laser focus on games, was high impact, and you know the trailers, you're going to want to rewatch them, and you're going to want to line up the release dates. But once you've done that, you know, aside from PSVR, there's not a whole lot to talk about. Microsoft has a lot more to sort of, all right, now I'm like actually thinking about, do I need that upgrade, or am I going to wait, or what does this mean for me?
Why even buy the smaller system when there's a better system coming next year?
I think it's a good move on Sony to go to the games thing, because Microsoft talking about all their Xbox Live stuff, I think that stuff's super important. I think that's obviously speaking to the fans, but I think that's what PSX is for, to kind of get more into the nitty-gritty stuff like that. And it really makes you think, like, I wonder in a couple years will Microsoft be playing catch-up and do something similar to then talk about the more community-focused stuff and the stuff that's not fun, you know, the stuff that's not like headline-worthy, like clicky, but it's more like meaningful to the players and stuff. Because this was a very different conference from Sony. They don't do stuff like this.
Well, let's talk about something that, sorry to interrupt, Tim.
Go
You're
for it.
good?
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about something that was a through line for a few concerts, conferences, VR. You had PlayStation VR. Ubisoft had VR being played on stage. In Bethesda, as you talked about, the first real mentions of AAA games being fully playable in VR. How did you guys think it was? How do you guys compare each sort of VR showing within the conferences?
So my thing is with Ubisoft, I'm impressed that a company finally showed VR being played on a stage and it worked. It didn't have any tech fails, it didn't have anything. It didn't look fun or cool, but
you didn't think that Eagle Flight looked
I
kind of
think
fun?
it looks fun, it just doesn't showcase well, which is the problem with it.
It would have been great for one goal. It would have been great for one thing and that's it. But when it was like, oh, you're playing a full match, then it's like, well, I'm gonna check Twitter now because this is not fun to watch.
Yeah, it's not fun to watch at all, and I think the big problem is it was really hard to understand what the game is and what the characters, not characters, people on stage are actually doing. How are they controlling it?
Are they purely steering with their
exactly,
head?
right.
Are they
What's
analog
going on?
assisted?
Right.
Yeah.
But I will give it to them that at least it worked, because we've seen at PSX, we've seen at other E3 shows, the VR just doesn't work on stage, so at least they had that. But Sony's conference, that's how you sell units. Oh my God, PSVR, I guarantee you, because of last night, they're going to sell way more than they were
Sure,
getting.
there was suddenly stuff you wanted to play. It wasn't a demo, it wasn't a weird experience, it was, remember the kitchen demo? That's Resident Evil.
Resident Evil 7, Star Wars, Batman. It's just Final Fantasy. They're really just like, all right, what are the big things? Like, what are the biggest games that we can put on this? And they did.
Yeah.
And these are experiences, not games, except for
No,
Resident
well,
Evil.
experiences. But I mean, I think that experiences are what are going to sell this stuff, And I think that really a big part of VR is showing off to your friends. It's like, look at this cool new thing I have. It's like back when, in the old days when color TVs were a novelty. I think a lot of people buying VR is going to do it to be the cool kid, have people come over and experience these things, and they're going to want to experience Star Wars. Sitting in an X-Wing is awesome.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, to Chris's point, I think it was cool to see talk of, I wish Doom was totally playable. I don't know how it would render that in VR without blowing everything up. But Doom being such a fantastic game, it was really exciting to see that kind of stuff being shown. And Fallout 4 running in VR is exciting as well. PSVR has a great advantage with an install base, and I actually got an email from Amazon now confirming the release date and all that kind of stuff, which is cool. So, October 13th for that.
Thanks for getting me one.
I tried. I can only buy one. I'm buying myself one. We'll get them from Sony.
I'm on an airplane, Chris. You didn't help me at all.
I tried. We're going to get them. I'm sure we're going to get them. But to me, like, it also shows the marketing issues that VR is going to have. VR has significant marketing issues. Indeed, back to Tim's point about, and really everyone's point about Microsoft showing 3 consoles, basically, also shows a marketing problem as well. And I wonder if Sony was unintentionally, like, one of the pieces of blowback from not showing Neo was being able to sit back and say, like, well, how is Microsoft going to handle this now? Because you have your console, you have your new console, your new, like, Slim, and then you have the really new console. And you could sit back and watch how, like, what the tea leaves kind of tell you about how to handle that, because, dollars to donuts, sure as shit, they're going to have to deal with this problem as well with 3 different platforms.
Yeah.
4 if you count Vita, but 3 with, they'll release a slim PS4 probably. I thought it was going to be here, or a slimmer or a cheaper PS4, and then they have PS4.5. So I think these issues are going to be paramount from a marketing standpoint, and also maybe suggest that these are unforced errors that these companies are making, releasing things that people don't really want. And I want to see if that's true as well.
Well, I mean, it's just the Tale of Two Cities with PlayStation Neo and now Project Scorpio. That Scorpio kept the lid on it long enough to give you the polished presentation and have a bunch of developers be like, we want to give you better experiences, we want to give you better games. This allows it, this allows it. Whereas Sony leaked it all out and it was just like, it's barely better, it's just for 4K, it's only for VR, and everybody got all mad about it. And now it is the same thing where whether you're coming up from below or from up high, you're going to get back to that midpoint of, well, what the hell? Why do I need this system?
And that's why I think that Scorpio has an advantage, because the way that they're positioning this, and they might not know internally yet, Microsoft even might not even know internally what they're going to do with this machine. It seems powerful enough that it could be a new machine, like an entirely, and they're talking about it, like how it's backwards compatible and all those kinds of things. That is the problem with Sony, and that's why everyone's like, well, Colin, why are you so mad at Sony for PS4.5, but you think Scorpio's a good idea? And I'm like, because Scorpio seems like it's a new console, and they're just not saying it yet. And when you go back in time and you realize Microsoft released Xbox in the fall of 2001, and then in the fall of 2005, 4 years later, they released Xbox 360. Well, you see already a precedent being set for a new console that's backwards compatible.
Yeah, sure. Cycle.
So, like, I feel like with Scorpio, they might be eyeing, like Aaron Greenberg told us, a generationless kind of approach to gaming, and Sony is taking a more iterative approach without being modular. with a machine that's not that much powerful, and they're selling it as being like, well, don't worry about it, it's not that much more powerful, and that's not going to sell the consoles. That's why I think Sony's fucking up, and that's why I think Scorpio seems like it's more on the right path.
Well, what's really interesting to me is that, I don't know the exact leaked specs of the PS4 Neo, but the Xbox One S is more powerful. It has the 4K stuff, and it has the HDR, and this and that. It sounds like those are more comparable than even the Scorpio.
It's possible.
And I think that's an even bigger problem, is that Xbox has this thing, a more powerful Xbox coming out in 2 months.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I mean, to Microsoft's credit, and I said it, that's why I was surprised that Sony beat them. They needed to go on the offensive, and they took a shotgun and just shot it right in Sony's face. Now, I don't think that they realized that it was going to maybe some of those bullets might be repelled back at them. Some of that grape shot might be repelled back at them, and it was. But they needed to do that, and I thought that, Patrick Klepek, like I said yesterday, a friend of ours at Kotaku, wrote really well that the Scorpio is an admission by Microsoft that they lost. That they're saying we lost. PS4 and Xbox One's over, but now we're moving on to the next thing, and it's going to be the lines are going to be blurred between that console. And I think that their approach is smart. I continue to think that their hardware approach is smart. And by the way, that S unit that's coming out soon is super sexy and super sleek. We had it here from Aaron Greenberg. It's way smaller than they're even letting on, and so I think it looks about the same size as the PS4, maybe even a little smaller in some way. So I think it's kind of a really nice machine.
Yeah. I just still feel like what I brought up on one of our shows is the fact that with PlayStation 4 Neo, I'm like, oh, sure, take my money. I know of the hundreds of hours I put into the PlayStation 4, I've got my money's worth out of it. And now to have an Xbox, whether it's the next one or an iterated or whatever the hell it is, for me now it's going to be, no, prove it. Because I bought the Xbox One and I turn it on once every 6 months to play an exclusive or whatever. And granted, that's a luxury. It could be different. But right now, it is the same thing of like, well, I need to see what this does, Chris, before I care about it.
Well, I think Project Scorpio is them starting to prove it, but like Colin said, they're seeding that sort of PS4, Xbox One battle. They're like, you know what? What we really want your eyes on is the future when we're going to be the big boss hogs on the scene.
Yeah. Now, Tim, why was EA a disappointment? We've talked about it in terms of this is better because, but what did EA do wrong?
Well, I think it's easier now to look back on it now that we know how the whole game was played and where all the cards were on the table. Because, when it comes to third-party conferences, there's always the question of, oh, well, they didn't show this because they're going to show it at one of the big ones, right? So now that we kind of know where everything kind of fell, I thought it was really interesting that the PlayStation conference was really not third-party focused at all.
Yeah.
Like we didn't see Titanfall, we didn't see Call of Duty, we didn't see we saw Call of Duty. Keep saying that. We didn't see Battlefield, and that's interesting because you can kind of expect that you would have seen those things. So then going back to EA, it's especially in comparison. I feel like it's always been hard to compare the third parties to Microsoft or Sony, or back in the day Nintendo, but as the times went on, now that Bethesda's doing their thing, now that Square dropped out and Konami dropped out, now we're at, Ubisoft has stepped their game up. Bethesda just created a new rule set of how you're supposed to do that.
Sure.
So EA's just playing by their same rules they've been playing by, and they didn't have any wow factors. And I think that Sony's conference is a perfect example of how to do it. Games, demos, release dates, announcements, surprises. EA, demos.
Of games that are so far out that were already announced. I mean, it was good to see Jade Raymond go on the stage, a really talented game creator, a very celebrated game creator, well known for Assassin's Creed and other games, working now at Motive, a new studio that hasn't released a game yet, telling you exactly what you already know. It was just a complete waste of everyone's time. I hate to put it like that, but it's like, why?
It was a polished package of this is what's happening.
Yeah, it's like we already knew it. Like we already knew that. Why are you telling me like I don't already know that? Like everyone that's watching this conference knows what you're saying. So, like, where's the new stuff? And I feel like EA really shot itself in the foot because they're so contingent on annualization, which is fine. I don't think there's any problem with that at all. And they make great games. They make really great games. Actually, they're a great publisher, but they just lack the fanfare where it really, that was the one conference where I'm like, you do not need to have a press conference.
Yeah, and they made that mistake last year with Mass Effect. They're like, let's get into Mass Effect, and then it was dev diary, concept art.
Yep.
This year Mass Effect was a little more robust, but
So that's
a
just by
little
comparison,
more.
right?
but not a lot.
I could not believe, I was floored that that's all they said about Mass Effect, which indicates to me that game is in some sort of Trouble. Like
I think they should be further.
Yeah,
they
like-
should show
Oh
them
yeah,
more by now.
I'm shocked we didn't get a demo. Like honestly, that's the biggest thing. Is not only were we not surprised by EA, we didn't even get what we thought we would get.
I thought that was a slam dunk.
Expected.
I
Yeah,
thought that was a slam dunk. Those like Mass Effect release date.
They'll at least have
huge
that. That's
blowout.
all, yeah.
Yeah, like I don't know that like anyone would have been stupid walking in being like, of course we're gonna get the release date. And they're gonna show us 10 or 15 minutes of the game, and we're gonna explore this this new galaxy a little bit. They show you nothing, and I'm like, that's bad news. I hate to tell you, if you think you're gonna play that game, in the next calendar year, I would be confused unless their approach is gonna be more like Bethesda's with Fallout 4, where, although it's too late because the cat's already out of the bag, but Fallout 4, where it's like, in June the game exists, and in November here it is, you play it. But they already let the cat out of the bag. That's why Bethesda's so fucking good at what they do, and why they actually showed a lot of restraint, except for the fact that they hid my precious Wolfenstein game in some DOS write-up.
Yeah, let's
Very,
talk
very
about
DOS.
Bethesda. The first thing they did was to tease that Wolfenstein game. If you folks didn't see it, it was the DOS prompt. It's right in there. It says the new Colossus was after, the Old Blood, the New Order. They both had release dates. The new Colossus did not. So there's another Wolfie Times coming.
I can't wait.
but that's awesome.
Machine
See, that's
game.
how you do press conferences. You put those little things in there. You have those moments of, okay, you watch the press conference, you think it's cool, and then afterwards you're like, but you missed this, and that's awesome, man.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest point of relief, they opened with Quake, and I was like, God damn it. Like Machine Games is making Quake. This has been
Especially with the rumors, you wanted Wolfenstein,
Right.
but you thought that it was Machine Games on Quake.
right, and I was like, and when the id logo came up, I was shocked because I'm like, wow, it is scaled significantly. They just released a game.
Yeah.
Quake's definitely going to be a smaller game than Doom, but when I saw that logo, I was like, yes, Machine Games is still in play.
They're free. They can
They're
still make games.
still in play.
Yeah.
And so I think next year we see Evil Within 2 and Wolfenstein, the new Colossus as the big marquee games, and maybe the Elder Scrolls or something, although I doubt it.
Yeah.
Well, what did you guys think of Bethesda versus Ubisoft? Let's talk about this now, because one of the things they both did that, other conferences have done in the past, but was focus on their big games and the updates for them, like the Division updates, okay, Doom updates, Fallout 4 updates. That stuff falls flat to me.
It's the
in
same
press
thing where
conferences.
I think that Bethesda ended and we were like, all right, it was a solid show. They had information. It didn't blow our hair back. It wasn't the Fallout 4 conference. It wasn't this. It was just them giving you more of these updates. Yeah, whereas Ubisoft was, here's 2 hours of it. And it was like what we were saying on paper, Ubisoft was great. If you would cut it all out of, like, you had a great Ghost Recon demo. You got to see this. Just Dance opened, but it was fine. We were out of it real quick.
South Park.
Yeah, South Park was amazing. And that's the thing is, I think, comparatively, Ubisoft, for me at least, had more standout games in it, but it's so hard to stand out when it's so lethargic, and it just kept limping and lumbering on and not stopping.
Yeah.
It's tough to have, you got a lot of games to show. You want to do your, it's the 30 years of the company thing.
Yeah.
I thought that there was a lot of earnestness and a lot of personality. I think Aisha Tyler's a great host.
Yeah.
Nailed it.
But
Nailed it.
but yeah, I think that there is a trim the fat kind of thing there. The Division is your best-selling new IP ever, but do you need that much on it? I think that trimming that up would have gone a long way, but you're right, some really great games out of that press conference.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing was Watch Dogs, just in the sense that I was a little confused why they even announced this before E3. I guess maybe, they wanted to get it out there. They want people's eyes on it. People were excited about it. I'm looking forward to it. Similar to the transition from Assassin's Creed to Assassin's Creed 2, I think you could expect big things, a big change as they learn what people liked and didn't like about the original. But to just go on and on and on about Watch Dogs 2, it's like, dude, cut just 5
Less
minutes.
is more.
Yeah,
Really
and I feel
it
the
with
same way
that
about the
game.
game.
Especially after having the big reveal they had that week leading up to it. Where
Yeah.
There's 3 vignette videos about it. It's like, all right, get it. Knock it off. Ladies and gentlemen, what was your favorite press conference of E3 2016? Let us know in the comments below. Then share this video with your friends. And of course, keep coming back here to GameSpot.com or KindaFunny.com for all the E3 happenings.